He was boasting about only dating successful women when the doors opened, revealing his ex-wife completely transformed in military dress. His champagne glass shattered as the once skinny woman he rejected stood powerful and stunning with 3 beautiful girls calling out, "Daddy!" But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The snow fell in soft, thick flakes outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Fifth Avenue penthouse, transforming Central Park into a winter wonderland. Naomi Robinson adjusted the simple dress she'd purchased especially for this occasion, her fingers nervously smoothing the fabric that had cost her an entire week's salary as an assistant educator at a Bronx public school. At 24, she still couldn't believe she lived in this luxury apartment, so different from the cramped 2-bedroom she'd grown up in. Her gaze drifted to the bathroom counter where the pregnancy test sat, its pink lines undeniable, positive. She was carrying Jonathan Pierce's child. The thought sent a flutter of nervous excitement through her stomach. How would he react? They hadn't planned this. In fact, during their whirlwind courtship, Jonathan had been clear about wanting to wait. "Not now," he'd said, "but someday." Surely someday could be now, couldn't it? They'd been married for 8 months. His investment firm was thriving. And though she was young, Naomi felt ready to create the family she'd always dreamed of after losing her parents in a car accident 3 years ago. The distinctive ping of the private elevator made her heart leap. She quickly tucked the test into her pocket and took a deep breath. Jonathan Pierce strode into the apartment, every inch the 35-year-old CEO of Pierce Investments. Tall, blonde, with aristocratic features that generations of wealth had sculpted, he loosened his Italian silk tie as he walked. His Armani suit was impeccable, his leather shoes gleaming, his very posture exuding old money and privilege. "Hello, darling," he said, crossing the marble floor to plant a kiss on her cheek. The gesture was perfunctory, almost mechanical. Naomi leaned into him anyway, inhaling his expensive cologne. "How was your day?" she asked, following him into the kitchen where he poured himself a glass of 18-year-old scotch. "Exhausting. The Singapore deal is proving more complicated than anticipated." He took a long sip, not asking about her day teaching in the Bronx. He rarely did. Naomi wrapped her arms around herself. "We need to talk," she said, gathering courage as she reached into her pocket. Jonathan's eyebrows rose slightly, his attention still on his drink. "About?" She withdrew the pregnancy test and placed it on the kitchen island between them. "About this." His eyes dropped to the plastic stick. For one breathless moment, Naomi imagined joy spreading across his features, pictured him lifting her into his arms, celebrating this new life they'd created. Instead, his face transformed into something she'd never seen before. Disgust, repulsion, as if she'd placed a dead rat on the counter instead of news of their child. "What the hell is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Naomi's smile faltered. "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." Jonathan loosened his Hermes tie further, a mirthless laugh escaping his lips. "Is this some kind of trap? We discussed this before the wedding. No children." "But you said not yet," Naomi protested, her voice trembling. "You never said never. And you thought now was the time? When I'm in the middle of the biggest expansion in company history?" He drained his scotch and slammed the glass down. "This isn't happening, Naomi." She felt her world tilting. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you'll need to take care of it." His voice was cold, clinical. "My assistant can recommend a discreet doctor." Tears sprang to Naomi's eyes. "I want this baby, Jonathan. Our baby." His laugh was sharp as breaking ice. "Our baby? Look at yourself, Naomi." His gaze swept over her, dismissive. "A black woman from the Bronx who got lucky when I noticed her. You never belonged in my world, and children certainly don't fit into my 5-year plan." Each word hit her like a physical blow. "Lucky?" I thought you loved me." "Love?" He snorted. "You were useful for the company image. The progressive CEO with a wife from humble origins. Good for corporate diversity." Naomi felt the room spinning. "You married me for PR? What did you think? That it was your sparkling personality? Your community college education?" Jonathan walked to his briefcase and withdrew a manila envelope, sliding it across the marble countertop. "These are divorce papers, already signed on my end. My lawyers have been very generous considering our prenuptial agreement." She stared at the envelope, unable to process what was happening. "And the baby?" "Not my problem." His voice was flat. "You were always a charity project, Naomi. A failed experiment in making me look progressive to my investors. Consider this the end of the experiment." "You can't just throw us away," she whispered, one hand instinctively going to her still flat stomach. "I can, and I am." Jonathan glanced at his Patek Philippe watch. "You have until tomorrow to pack your things and leave. The security team has been informed." "Tomorrow? But where am I supposed to go?" Panic rose in her chest. "It's the middle of winter. There's a snowstorm." Again, not my problem. He was already walking toward their bedroom. His bedroom now. "I'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight. I suggest you use this time to pack rather than wasting it on emotional outbursts." Left alone in the kitchen, Naomi felt her legs give way. She sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. How had she been so blind? The signs had been there, the way he kept her separate from his social circle, how he never visited her workplace, his discomfort when she spoke about her upbringing. Through her tears, she noticed a notification on her phone. It was her banking app. With trembling fingers, she opened it to find her access to their joint account had been revoked. When she tried her credit card app, the same message appeared. Account suspended. Outside, the snow fell harder, the wind howling against the luxury windows. Naomi pulled herself up and walked to the bedroom, their bedroom just minutes ago, and pulled out a suitcase. How much could she fit? What should she take? Where would she go? As she folded clothes into the suitcase, her mind raced through options. Her parents were gone. Her closest friend had moved to California last year. She had colleagues at the school, but none close enough to impose on during a snowstorm. 3 hours later, Naomi had filled one suitcase with essentials: family photos, important documents, the few pieces of jewelry she'd owned before meeting Jonathan, clothes that would be practical rather than the designer items he'd insisted on buying her. She tried calling a taxi company, but they weren't sending cars due to the storm. Public transportation was running on a limited schedule. And Jonathan? He remained in the guest room, door firmly closed. Morning came with blinding whiteness outside the windows. Naomi had spent the night on the sofa, unable to sleep in what had been her marital bed. She made a final attempt to reason with Jonathan over breakfast. "Please, Jonathan, just give me a few days to find a place. The terms are non-negotiable," he replied, not looking up from his financial newspaper. "Security will escort you out at noon." At precisely 12 o'clock, 2 security guards knocked on the penthouse door. They were apologetic, but firm. "Mrs. Pierce, we need to escort you downstairs." "It's Ms. Robinson now, apparently," she said, the hurt making her voice bitter. One guard took her suitcase while the other walked beside her to the private elevator. The last glimpse she had of her married life was Jonathan standing by the window, already on his phone, not even watching her leave. In the lobby, Naomi tried her credit card at the ATM. Declined. She checked her personal account, the one she'd had before marriage that her teaching salary was deposited into. There was just under $300, not enough for a hotel in Manhattan during a snowstorm. Outside, the snow had been cleared from the immediate sidewalk, but drifts 3 feet high lined the street. The wind cut through her coat, a practical one she'd kept from before, not the designer ones hanging in the closet upstairs. "Ma'am, do you need us to call you a car?" one of the security guards asked, genuine concern on his face. Pride made her straighten her spine. "No, thank you. I've got it covered." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Dragging her suitcase through the snow, Naomi made it 2 blocks before finding a coffee shop. Inside, she ordered the cheapest item on the menu and used the free Wi-Fi to search for available rooms. Everything remotely affordable was miles away in the outer boroughs. Her phone buzzed with a text from a coworker, Lisa, responding to her desperate message. "You can crash at my place in the Bronx, but I'm at my boyfriend's this week. Key under the mat." Relief washed over her. Somewhere to go, somewhere to think. The subway ride to the Bronx took over an hour with the weather delays. By the time Naomi reached Lisa's building, her feet were soaked, her face streaked with frozen tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. The apartment was tiny, a studio with peeling paint and a radiator that clanked but barely provided heat. But it was shelter. Naomi sank onto the worn sofa, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from a penthouse on Fifth Avenue to a rundown studio in the Bronx, from wife to discarded inconvenience, from financially secure to nearly destitute. She placed a hand on her stomach. "It's just you and me now," she whispered to the life growing inside her. That night, as the storm raged outside the drafty windows, Naomi Robinson curled up under a thin blanket with only $20 in her wallet and a positive pregnancy test. She couldn't have imagined that one day she would own a company worth $1.2 billion and that her ex-husband would beg for a second chance. The $20 in Naomi's wallet wouldn't last long. She stared at the peeling ceiling of Lisa's apartment, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. Morning sickness had woken her before dawn, sending her rushing to the tiny bathroom. Now, lying back on the lumpy sofa, reality crashed over her in waves. Pregnant, alone, nearly broke. Her phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Her shift at Bronx Elementary started in 2 hours. At least she still had her job. The thought of facing curious colleagues made her stomach churn again, but she couldn't afford to call in sick. Not anymore. Naomi forced herself up, rummaging through her hastily packed suitcase for something appropriate. The designer clothes Jonathan had insisted she wear wouldn't work for chasing after kindergarteners. She found an old pair of sensible slacks and a simple blouse, grateful she'd kept some of her pre-marriage wardrobe. The subway ride to the school was a blur of nausea and anxiety. She'd been married for 8 months. How would she explain her sudden return to her maiden name? The wedding ring she'd already slipped off her finger? The questions would come, and she had no prepared answers. "Ms. Robinson, are you all right?" Principal Garcia asked when she arrived, noticing her pallor. "You look a little green." "Just fighting a bug," Naomi lied, forcing a smile. "I'll be fine." The kindergarteners were a welcome distraction. 20 energetic 5-year-olds who cared nothing about her marital status or address. For 6 hours, she read stories, supervised finger painting, and resolved playground disputes, pushing her personal crisis to the background. But as the children filed out at the end of the day, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. She still needed to find an apartment, access her remaining funds, figure out prenatal care without Jonathan's premium insurance. "Naomi?" Lisa appeared in the classroom doorway. "Got your text. My place is yours as long as you need it." "Thank you," Naomi said, her voice catching. "I don't know what I would have done." "Don't mention it. I'm so sorry about everything." Lisa hesitated. "Do you need to talk about it?" Naomi shook her head. "Not yet. I need to find a more permanent place first, and a second job." Lisa's eyebrows shot up. "A second job? You're already working 40 hours here." "I don't have a choice. Teaching assistant salary won't cover rent and a baby." "A baby?" Lisa's eyes widened, dropping to Naomi's still flat stomach. Naomi nodded, tears threatening. "That's why he threw me out. Didn't fit his 5-year plan." "That absolute bastard!" Lisa hissed. "Wait, my cousin manages a diner in the neighborhood. They're always looking for evening help. Hours would be rough with your day job, but tips are decent." 3 days later, Naomi started her second job at the Starlight Diner, a 24-hour establishment 10 blocks from Lisa's apartment. The evening shift ran from 6 to midnight, giving her just enough time to get home from school, change into her waitress uniform, and make it to work. Her first night was a disaster of dropped plates and mixed-up orders, her exhausted brain struggling to keep track of everything. But by the end of the week, she'd developed a system, memorizing the menu and learning which customers tipped well. 2 weeks into her new routine, Naomi sat in a cramped waiting room at a community health clinic, surrounded by other pregnant women, many looking as tired as she felt. When her name was called, she followed a nurse to an examination room. "First pregnancy?" the doctor asked, reviewing her intake form. "Yes," Naomi answered, trying to quell her anxiety. The ultrasound machine hummed to life. The doctor moved the wand across her abdomen, studying the screen with increasing interest. "Ms. Robinson," she said slowly, "I'm seeing multiple heartbeats here." "Multiple?" Naomi's own heart seemed to stop. "Twins?" The doctor adjusted the wand, counting silently. "Actually, I'm detecting 3 distinct heartbeats. You're carrying triplets." The room spun around Naomi. "Triplets? Are you sure?" "Quite sure. See here?" The doctor pointed to the screen where 3 tiny fluttering lights pulsed. "Congratulations. You're going to be very busy." Naomi stumbled out of the clinic in a daze. Triplets. Not 1 baby, but 3. 3 times the diapers, 3 times the formula, 3 times everything. On her salary? Impossible. That night at the diner, she mechanically took orders and delivered food, her mind calculating and recalculating. Even with 2 jobs, the numbers didn't add up. She'd found a tiny studio apartment in a rundown building, but even that would strain her budget with 1 baby. With 3? During her break, she slumped in a back booth, flipping through a discarded magazine someone had left behind. A familiar face stared back at her from the society pages. Jonathan Pierce, smiling broadly at some charity gala, a willowy blonde model on his arm. The caption read, "Investment wunderkind Jonathan Pierce with supermodel Alessandra at the Metropolitan Museum benefit. Pierce Investments announced record profits this quarter." Bile rose in Naomi's throat. While she worked double shifts with swollen feet and morning sickness that lasted all day, he was parading around with models, his life uninterrupted by the destruction he'd caused. She was still staring at the photo when Mrs. Kessler, a regular customer in her 70s, slid into the booth across from her. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear," the older woman said, eyeing the magazine. Naomi quickly closed it. "Just tired." "Mm-hmm. And pregnant, I'd wager," Mrs. Kessler said shrewdly. "My Etta had that same green look with all 3 of her babies." A hysterical laugh bubbled up. "3 is right. Just found out I'm having triplets." Mrs. Kessler's eyes widened. "My word! And here you are on your feet all day and night? Where's their father?" The question was like a knife to the heart. "Not in the picture." "Well, you're a strong young woman, I can see that plain as day." Mrs. Kessler patted her hand, but even the strong need help sometimes. 4 months into her pregnancy, Naomi's body began to rebel against her punishing schedule. Her ankles swelled to twice their normal size during her shifts at the school, where chasing after active kindergartners became increasingly difficult. The triplets made her belly expand far faster than a singleton pregnancy would have, drawing curious stares and unsolicited advice from strangers. Principal Garcia called her into his office one Friday afternoon. His expression was grave as she lowered herself carefully into the chair opposite his desk. "Naomi, I'll get straight to the point. The district has announced budget cuts." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "We have to eliminate 2 teaching assistant positions." Her heart sank. "And I'm one of them. I fought for you, but the superintendent made the final decision." He finally looked at her, his discomfort obvious. "They cited concerns about your physical ability to keep up with the children in your current condition." The unfairness of it stung worse than the news itself. "That's discrimination." "It is," he agreed quietly, "but fighting it would take time and money you don't have." We both know that." She left the school building for the last time, clutching a small box of personal items, unemployment paperwork tucked inside. That night at the diner, she moved more slowly than usual, her back aching relentlessly. The regular customers were kind, but she noticed her tips decreasing as her pregnancy became more pronounced. People didn't want their food delivered by someone who looked ready to give birth at any moment, even though she was only in her second trimester. "Take table 7, Sandy," the other waitress said during a rare, quiet moment. "That woman's been asking for you specifically." Naomi approached the booth to find Mrs. Kessler, who hadn't been in for several weeks. "Look at you!" the older woman exclaimed. "Those babies are growing beautifully." Naomi managed a tired smile. "Growing is right. I'm already wearing maternity clothes for 8 months. And still working these long hours," Mrs. Kessler clucked disapprovingly. "Have you found any help?" "Lost my day job," Naomi admitted, the words bitter on her tongue. "Budget cuts," they said, "but we all know the real reason." Mrs. Kessler's expression hardened. "Shameful. In my day, we had community. People looked after each other." That night, after a 12-hour shift, Naomi dragged herself to the employee locker room. The world tilted suddenly, black spots dancing before her eyes. She reached for the wall but found only air as her knees buckled. The cold floor against her cheek was the last thing she remembered before voices penetrated the darkness. "Call an ambulance!" someone was shouting. "No ambulance!" she mumbled, thinking of the cost. "Just need to rest." Strong hands helped her sit up. When her vision cleared, she found herself looking into the concerned face of an unfamiliar woman in her 50s, with steel-gray hair cut in a practical bob and the ramrod-straight posture of someone with military background. "Easy now," the woman said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I'm Beth Sullivan. I was having coffee when Sandy found you collapsed." "I'm fine," Naomi insisted weakly. "Just tired." "You're not fine. You're severely dehydrated and exhausted." Beth helped her to a chair. "Sandy tells me you're pregnant with triplets and working 60-hour weeks. That's not sustainable." "I don't have a choice," Naomi whispered, too drained to maintain her usual facade of competence. Beth studied her with sharp blue eyes. "Everyone has choices. Sometimes we just need help seeing them." The manager insisted Naomi go home, Beth offering to drive her. Too weak to argue, she found herself in a sensible sedan, directing Beth to her tiny studio apartment. "This is where you live?" Beth asked as they climbed the 4 flights of stairs, Naomi leaning heavily on the handrail. "It's all I can afford," Naomi said defensively as she unlocked the door. The studio was barely 400 square feet, with a kitchenette in one corner, a threadbare sofa that doubled as her bed, and a bathroom so small she could touch all 4 walls at once. She'd done her best to make it homey, a colorful throw pillow, a small plant on the windowsill, but there was no disguising its inadequacy for one person, let alone a mother with triplets. Beth took in the space with a frown. "Where will you put 3 cribs?" The question Naomi had been avoiding pierced her like a physical pain. "I don't know," she admitted, sinking onto the sofa. "I've been saving, but between rent and food and now losing my teaching job, I don't know." To her horror, tears began streaming down her face. All the fear and exhaustion she'd been holding at bay crashed through her carefully constructed walls. Beth sat beside her, offering a tissue from her purse. "Tell me your story," she said simply. "The real one." And Naomi did. About meeting Jonathan when she worked reception at his building, their whirlwind romance, the fairy tale wedding, and the nightmare ending. About discovering her pregnancy the day he discarded her like a used tissue. About working herself to exhaustion trying to prepare for 3 babies she both loved fiercely and feared she couldn't provide for. When she finished, Beth was silent for a long moment. "I have a spare bedroom in my house," she finally said. "It's yours for the rest of your pregnancy. No arguments," she added when Naomi began to protest. "I'm a retired army captain. I recognize a soldier when I see one, and you're fighting a war on multiple fronts. Let me be your reinforcement." That night, as Beth helped her pack her meager belongings, Naomi felt something she hadn't experienced since that snowy night when her world collapsed. Hope. While dozing in the passenger seat of Beth's car, heading toward what would become her sanctuary for the final months of pregnancy, Naomi couldn't know that the woman beside her would not only save her life that night, but would become the catalyst for a transformation that would one day make Jonathan Pierce regret ever underestimating the woman he so carelessly threw away. Beth's home in a quiet Queens neighborhood was modest but immaculately maintained, with a small garden out front and an American flag hanging by the door. As Naomi crossed the threshold, she felt a strange mix of relief and embarrassment, grateful for the sanctuary, but ashamed she needed it. "The guest room is this way," Beth said, leading her down a hallway adorned with framed military commendations and family photos. She opened a door to reveal a space 3 times the size of Naomi's studio apartment. A queen bed with crisp white linens dominated the room, flanked by wooden nightstands and reading lamps. "Bathrooms through there. Closet has plenty of space." Naomi set her single suitcase down, overwhelmed. "I can't accept this, Beth. It's too much." The retired captain's expression softened. "When I was stationed in Afghanistan, my unit got pinned down in a village. We were outnumbered, communications down. A local family hid us in their home for 3 days, risking their lives. When I tried to thank them, the grandmother said something I never forgot. In this life, we're all just travelers taking turns giving shelter." Beth patted Naomi's shoulder. "It's your turn to take shelter, that's all." Over the following weeks, Naomi's body finally received what it desperately needed: rest. Beth insisted she quit the diner job immediately, brushing aside Naomi's protests about finances. "I've got a military pension that more than covers this house," Beth explained over breakfast one morning, "and you need to focus on growing those babies strong." With Beth's support, Naomi began attending regular prenatal appointments at a clinic that served low-income mothers. At 28 weeks, an ultrasound confirmed what she already knew: 3 distinct heartbeats, 3 tiny faces, 3 pairs of kicking legs. "They're doing beautifully," Dr. Wilson said, pointing to the screen. "All measuring right on track. Do you want to know the genders?" Naomi nodded, transfixed by the black and white images of the lives inside her. 3 girls, identical triplets, which is extremely rare. The doctor's eyes crinkled above her mask. "They're fighters, just like their mama." That evening, Beth helped Naomi begin preparations for the baby's arrival. They converted half the guest room into a nursery space, rearranging furniture to make room for the cribs Beth's veterans group had donated. 3 little girls, Beth mused, assembling the first crib. "Have you thought about names?" Naomi ran her hand over her swollen belly. "I've been reading about extraordinary women throughout history. I want my daughters to have names that remind them they can overcome anything." Like their mother, Beth nodded approvingly. In the quiet moments before dawn, when pregnancy insomnia kept her awake, Naomi would sit in the rocking chair by the window, talking softly to her daughters. She told them about her childhood in the Bronx, about the parents they would never meet, about her dreams of becoming a teacher. She never mentioned Jonathan. There would be time enough for that truth when they were older. At 32 weeks, Naomi woke to a sharp pain radiating across her abdomen. When it happened again 10 minutes later, she knew. "Beth," she called, knocking on the older woman's door. "I think I'm in labor." The next hours were a blur of ambulance lights, hospital corridors, and medical terms thrown around with increasing urgency. Premature labor, steroid shots for lung development, try to delay delivery. Despite the doctor's efforts, Naomi's body had decided it was time. After 18 hours of labor, she was wheeled into an operating room for an emergency C-section. "Blood pressure dropping," someone called. "Stay with us, Naomi." Dr. Wilson's voice seemed to come from far away. Your girls need you to fight." The harsh operating room lights, the beeping monitors, the metallic smell of blood. These were her last conscious memories before darkness claimed her. When Naomi opened her eyes, Beth's worried face swam into view. "There you are," the older woman said, relief evident in her voice. "You gave us quite a scare." Naomi's hand instinctively went to her now deflated abdomen. "My babies. They're in the NICU, small but mighty, the nurses say." Beth helped her sip water through a straw. "You lost a lot of blood during the surgery. They had to transfuse you." "I need to see them." Naomi tried to sit up, wincing at the pain that shot through her abdomen. "As soon as you're stable," Beth promised. "I've been taking pictures." She showed Naomi her phone, scrolling through images of 3 tiny infants, each in their own incubator, tubes and wires connecting their miniature bodies to machines. Tears slid down Naomi's face. They were so small, so vulnerable. "Have you seen them? Really seen them?" Beth nodded, her own eyes glistening. "They're beautiful, Naomi. Perfect little fighters with your determination written all over their faces." 3 days later, when Naomi was finally strong enough to be wheeled to the NICU, she understood what Beth meant. Despite their tiny size, none weighing more than 4 pounds, each girl had an unmistakable presence. The nurses had placed identifying bracelets on their wrists and ankles, but Naomi found she could already tell them apart. "Hello, my loves," she whispered, carefully placing her hand inside the first incubator to touch her eldest daughter's impossibly small fist. The baby's fingers curled reflexively around her mother's fingertip. "That's right, I'm your mama." For 2 weeks, Naomi practically lived in the NICU. Beth brought her clean clothes and home-cooked meals, watching over her as fiercely as Naomi watched over her daughters. Slowly, the triplets gained strength. First one, then another, then the third was deemed stable enough to try breastfeeding. "Have you decided on names?" the NICU nurse asked one afternoon as Naomi held her firstborn against her chest. "Yes," Naomi answered softly. "This is Amelia, after Amelia Earhart, fearless and determined." She nodded toward the second incubator. "That's Zora, after Zora Neale Hurston, brilliant and outspoken." Her eyes moved to the third baby, the smallest. "And that's Maya, after Maya Angelou, resilient and wise." The day Naomi was preparing to be discharged, a courier arrived at her hospital room with an envelope bearing the logo of Pierce Investments. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were legal documents declaring that Jonathan Pierce formally denied paternity and relinquished all parental rights to any children born to Naomi Robinson. Attached was a check for $5,000 with a note from Jonathan's lawyer calling it a compassionate gesture not to be construed as admission of responsibility. Beth found her sitting motionless, the papers scattered across the bed. "He doesn't want them," Naomi said hollowly. "He's paying me to go away and never contact him again." Beth picked up the check, examined it, then tore it in half. "You don't need his blood money." "But how will I—" "One day at a time," Beth interrupted firmly. "Those girls have you and me. That's more than enough for now." The day finally came when all 3 babies were strong enough to leave the hospital. The NICU nurses gathered to say goodbye, many wiping away tears as they helped load the triplets into the car seats Beth had secured. Back at Beth's house, the reality of caring for 3 newborns hit with full force. The girls needed feeding every 2 hours, often not at the same time. Sleep became a distant memory. Naomi moved through her days in a fog of exhaustion, learning each baby's cries, preferences, and quirks. Amelia, the firstborn, was strong-willed from the start, her tiny fists often clenched as if ready to fight the world. Zora was alert and watchful, her eyes tracking movement across the room long before developmental charts said she should be able to focus. Maya, the smallest, was gentle and observant, calming immediately when she heard Naomi's voice. One night, after finally getting all 3 girls to sleep simultaneously, a rare victory, Naomi sat in the rocking chair, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. In the dim glow of the nightlight, she could see hints of Jonathan in their features, the shape of Amelia's eyes, Zora's chin, Maya's delicate ears. The resemblance brought not pain but a fierce protectiveness. "You made a mistake walking away from us," she whispered into the quiet room. "One day, you'll realize what you threw away." The following morning, as Naomi fed Maya while Amelia and Zora dozed nearby, Beth entered with a serious expression and a stack of brochures. "I've been thinking about your future," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The military has a special program for single mothers. It would give you education, health care for the girls, housing, a real future." Naomi stared at her. "The military? Me? Why not you? You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." Beth spread the brochures on the bed. "This particular program allows for family considerations. You'd have to complete basic training, but there are support systems for the girls while you do." "I can't leave them," Naomi protested, looking down at Maya's peaceful face. "It would be temporary, and I would be here for them," Beth promised. "Think about what this could mean: college education, career skills, benefits for your daughters." Naomi was silent, considering. She thought of the tiny studio apartment she could no longer afford, the job market that had already rejected her once because of her pregnancy, the mountain of hospital bills arriving daily. "They deserve more than struggling paycheck to paycheck," Beth continued softly, "and so do you." Later that night, after feeding and changing all three girls, Naomi stood over their cribs, studying their sleeping faces. "What kind of life can I give you?" she whispered. Her parents had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities. Now it was her turn. She picked up each baby, one by one, cradling them close and breathing in their newborn scent. With Amelia, Zora, and Maya in her arms, Naomi made a solemn promise. "You will never know what it is to not be enough, and one day he will see exactly what he threw away." Looking at her three daughters asleep in their donated cribs, Naomi couldn't foresee that the path suggested by Beth would lead her not just to financial independence, but to creating one of the most innovative technology companies in the United States. The path suggested by Beth Sullivan was not an easy one, but neither was raising triplets alone in a world that had already proven its cruelty. In the pale light of dawn, Naomi stood in the nursery, memorizing the peaceful faces of her 6-month-old daughters. Amelia's tiny fist was curled against her cheek, Zora's eyes fluttered in dream-filled sleep, and Maya's gentle breathing created a rhythm that Naomi had come to find more soothing than any lullaby. "I'll be back before you know it," she whispered, her throat tight with emotion. "Aunt Beth will take good care of you." Beth appeared in the doorway, her military posture softened by the compassion in her eyes. "The car's packed. We should get on the road if you want to reach Fort Jackson by nightfall." Naomi nodded, unable to speak. She leaned down to kiss each baby one last time. Amelia's forehead, Zora's cheek, Maya's tiny palm. When she straightened, tears streamed freely down her face. "They'll be here when you finish," Beth assured her, placing a steady hand on Naomi's shoulder. "I promise to send pictures every day. This is the right choice, Naomi." The drive to the processing center where Naomi would join other recruits felt interminable. Beth filled the silence with stories from her own military career, punctuated by practical advice about surviving basic training. "Remember why you're doing this," Beth said as they pulled up to the imposing brick building. "Every push-up, every early morning, it's all for those 3 little girls." Naomi's first week of basic training was a blur of shouting drill sergeants, physical exhaustion, and nights spent silently crying into her pillow, missing the scent of her daughters. The strict regimentation left little time for homesickness during daylight hours, but in the precious moments before sleep claimed her, Naomi would whisper their names like a prayer. The second week brought the first video call. Beth positioned the camera so Naomi could see all 3 babies at once, propped on pillows on the living room floor. "They've grown!" Naomi gasped, pressing her fingers to the screen as if she could reach through it. "Zora's hair is coming in thicker." "She's the charmer already," Beth confirmed, "always watching everything." Maya smiled yesterday, a real smile, not just gas, and Amelia rolled over twice. When the call ended, Naomi sat motionless, a hollow ache in her chest. The girls looked different after just 2 weeks. What would they be like after 10? "They won't even know me," she confided to her bunkmate that night. "My mom deployed 3 times when I was little," the woman replied. "Trust me, they'll know you. My mom said absence makes the heart fonder, but presence makes it stronger. You're doing the presence part soon enough." Training intensified as weeks passed. Naomi's body, still recovering from pregnancy and C-section, screamed in protest during the punishing runs through Georgia mud. But when other recruits faltered, she pushed forward, the image of her daughters driving her through pain and exhaustion. During a particularly brutal obstacle course, Naomi slipped from a rope-climbing wall, landing hard on her back. The drill sergeant loomed over her, face contorted in practiced intimidation. "On your feet, Robinson. You think this is hard? Try facing enemy fire." Naomi struggled to stand, her muscles quivering with fatigue. "My daughters!" she gasped, using a nearby post to pull herself upright. "What's that, recruit?" the sergeant barked. "I have 3 daughters waiting for me, sir," Naomi replied, straightening her spine despite the pain. "I won't let them down." Something shifted in the sergeant's expression, not softness, but perhaps recognition. He nodded once, then turned to bellow at another struggling recruit. By graduation day 8 weeks later, Naomi was transformed. Her body had shed the last remnants of pregnancy, replacing softness with lean muscle. Her mind was sharper, more focused. When Beth arrived with the triplets, now nearly 8 months old and attempting their first wobbly movements toward crawling, Naomi was momentarily frozen in place. "They're so different," she whispered, as Beth transferred Maya into her arms. The baby stared up at her mother with curious eyes, then broke into a gummy smile of recognition that melted Naomi's heart. "They know you," Beth said confidently. "I've shown them your picture every day, told them stories about their brave mama." Amelia and Zora were equally receptive, reaching for Naomi with chubby hands and babbling excitedly. By day's end, it was as if the separation had never happened. They were back in sync, mother and daughters reconnected by an unbreakable bond. Naomi's first posting was fortunately close enough to New York that Beth could help with the transition. The family housing on base was modest but functional, a 2-bedroom unit with a small living area and kitchenette. After the cramped studio apartment and even Beth's guest room converted to nursery, it felt like a palace. "Welcome home, girls," Naomi said, setting Amelia down on the carpet of their new living room. Zora immediately began exploring, crawling toward an air vent with determined curiosity. Maya sat contentedly in Beth's lap, observing everything with her thoughtful eyes. The routine of military life provided unexpected stability. Daycare on base allowed Naomi to work regular hours, while the structured environment helped the triplets thrive. Their first birthday arrived with a small celebration. Beth, a few fellow soldiers with children, and 3 wobbly toddlers destroying identical cupcakes. "To my miraculous daughters," Naomi toasted, holding up a plastic cup of punch. "And to Beth, without whom we wouldn't be here." Beth brushed away the compliment with characteristic modesty. "You did the hard part. I just provided a landing spot." It was 2 months after the birthday celebration when Naomi's aptitude for technology first revealed itself. Her unit was struggling with malfunctioning communications equipment before a major exercise. Engineers had been called but wouldn't arrive for days. "Let me look at it," Naomi offered impulsively. She had always been good with computers but had never pursued it formally. Her commanding officer shrugged. "It can't get more broken." 3 hours later, Naomi had not only fixed the original issue but had improved the system's range. Her CO watched in disbelief as she demonstrated the modifications. "Where did you learn to do that, Robinson?" "I didn't, sir. I just..." saw how it could work better. The incident led to her reassignment to the communications division, where her talent flourished. Soon she was taking night classes in engineering through the military's education program, excelling despite the exhaustion of balancing motherhood, military duties, and studies. Life fell into a demanding but rewarding rhythm. Naomi would wake at 5, prepare for the day, then rouse her daughters for breakfast. After dropping them at the base daycare, she'd report for duty, work until late afternoon, retrieve the girls, make dinner, play with them, and put them to bed. Only then would she open her textbooks, studying until her eyes burned, determined to create a future worthy of her daughter's potential. The triplets developed distinct personalities as they grew. Amelia was indeed the leader, first to walk, first to climb out of her crib, first to figure out how door locks worked, much to Naomi's exhausted dismay. Zora's language skills exploded suddenly at 18 months. She began speaking in full sentences while other toddlers were still mastering individual words. Maya, quieter than her sisters but no less remarkable, displayed an uncanny ability to understand mechanical objects, taking apart her toys and reassembling them correctly. One evening, as Naomi sat at the kitchen table surrounded by circuit design homework, she glanced up to see Maya methodically disassembling a toy robot, examining each piece before putting it back together. The sight triggered an idea for the communication system she'd been struggling to conceptualize for class. "Maya, you genius," she murmured, quickly sketching the inspiration before it faded. That design would later become the foundation of her first patent, though she couldn't have known it then. As the triplets approached their second birthday, Naomi's academic performance caught the attention of her superiors. She was offered advanced training in engineering, with the potential for officer candidacy if she continued to excel. "You have a gift, Robinson," her commanding officer told her. "The Army needs people who can think beyond existing parameters." On rare occasions, usually late at night when the girls were asleep, Naomi would glimpse Jonathan in the news or financial magazines. Each time, the sight of him triggered less pain, replaced gradually by a cool detachment. In one such instance, she saw him featured in a business magazine's 30 Under 30 list, pictured in an impeccable suit aboard a yacht, champagne glass in hand. "The father of your children," Beth observed during one of her visits, finding Naomi staring at the image. "No," Naomi replied firmly, closing the magazine. "Biology doesn't make him their father. He's just a donor who never wanted them." "Will you ever tell him about them?" Beth asked carefully. Naomi looked toward the bedroom where her daughters slept peacefully. "He made his choice. We're making ours." The milestones came rapidly after that: promotions at work, academic achievements, and the daily miracles of watching her daughters develop. Amelia's first word was more as she demanded another book at bedtime. Zora surprised everyone by saying "hola" after hearing it from the child of a Hispanic officer at daycare. Maya's first word was "how," asked persistently as she pointed at various devices around their home. On her 26th birthday, after the girls were asleep, Naomi sat at her small desk reviewing her life's trajectory. 4 years had passed since that snowy night when Jonathan had cast her out. 4 years since she'd been told she wasn't enough, that she was just a diversity project for his corporate image. Now she wore the rank of specialist, was on track to complete her engineering degree with honors, and was raising 3 remarkable daughters who already showed signs of extraordinary potential. The contrast wasn't lost on her. In the soft lamplight, she opened her notebook and began sketching a concept that had been forming in her mind for weeks: a more secure communication system for field operations. The idea had come to her during a training exercise when standard protocols had failed under simulated attack conditions. Her pencil moved swiftly across the paper, mapping circuits and signal pathways. Hours passed unnoticed as the design took shape, elegant in its simplicity, yet revolutionary in its approach. While drawing circuits in her notebook, Naomi didn't imagine that this simple, secure communication project would become the foundation of a technology that would revolutionize national security and transform her into one of the country's most valuable companies. The simple, secure communication project sketched in Naomi's notebook would prove to be anything but simple. 3 years after joining the army, she now moved through the base with the confidence of someone who had found her place in the world. At 27, her posture mirrored Beth's military bearing, her movements precise and purposeful as she navigated the familiar hallways of the communications division. "Lieutenant Robinson," Colonel Harris called, beckoning her into the conference room where several high-ranking officers were gathered around a table covered with technical diagrams. "Walk us through your proposal again." Naomi straightened her uniform and approached the table. The faces watching her were skeptical. Mostly older men who had spent decades in military technology. Men who weren't accustomed to taking direction from a young black woman who had entered service as a single mother. "The current field communication systems fail under 3 specific conditions," she began, her voice steady. "Signal jamming, physical damage to equipment, and compromised encryption." She pointed to her diagrams. "My adaptive frequency system addresses all 3 vulnerabilities simultaneously." A general with salt and pepper hair leaned forward. "And you developed this entirely on your own?" The question carried the familiar undercurrent she'd grown accustomed to, the implication that she couldn't possibly have created something so innovative without help. 3 years ago, it might have made her doubt herself. Now she met his gaze directly. "Yes, sir. Every component." The room fell silent as the officers examined her designs. Finally, Colonel Harris spoke. "The Pentagon has expressed interest. They're offering you a spot in their advanced doctoral program." Naomi's heart raced. "A doctorate?" "Fully funded. They want you to develop this technology further under their supervision." Later that evening, Naomi practically flew through the door of her small base housing unit. Beth, who had relocated to be near the family, was reading a story to the triplets, now 3 years old and hanging on every word. "Beth, you won't believe—" She stopped short at the sight of her daughters, all in mismatched pajamas, crowded on the sofa. The emotion of the moment overwhelmed her. "Mama's home!" Zora announced, always the first to speak. The girls scrambled off the couch in a chaotic rush of tiny limbs and excited squeals. "What happened?" Beth asked, noting Naomi's barely contained excitement. "The Pentagon wants my project. They're offering me a doctoral program." She scooped up Maya, who had reached her first. "We're going to have a real future, girls." "What's a doctor program?" Amelia demanded, tugging at Naomi's uniform pants. "It means Mama gets to build important things," Naomi explained, kneeling to embrace all 3. "Things that will help keep soldiers safe." That night, after the triplets were finally asleep, Naomi and Beth sat at the small kitchen table, a celebratory cup of tea between them. "I knew you had it in you," Beth said. "From that first night at the diner, I could see it." "I couldn't have done it without you," Naomi replied, her voice thick with gratitude. Beth waved her off. "The strength was always yours. I just provided some logistics." The doctoral program proved both exhilarating and demanding. Naomi moved her family to a slightly larger home near the research facility, establishing a new routine that balanced her intensive studies with motherhood. The triplets, now in preschool, continued to display extraordinary abilities that both delighted and occasionally overwhelmed their teachers. One afternoon, Naomi was called to a parent-teacher conference. She arrived in her uniform, straight from the lab, to find 3 very different reports awaiting her. "Amelia has tested at a 5th-grade mathematics level," Ms. Winters explained, showing Naomi a series of complex problems her daughter had solved. "She's designing number patterns that show remarkable spatial reasoning." Naomi examined the papers, recognizing the same instinctive understanding of systems that had guided her own work. "Zora's language acquisition is unprecedented," the teacher continued. "She's picked up Spanish and French from our language program, but she's also learning Mandarin from a classmate. She seems to absorb languages effortlessly." Pride swelled in Naomi's chest. "And Maya?" Ms. Winters smiled. Yesterday, the classroom tablet stopped working. Before I could even call IT support, Maya had removed the back panel, reattached a loose connection, and handed it back to me, working perfectly. That evening, Naomi watched her daughters play in their modest living room. Amelia was creating an intricate pattern with building blocks, explaining the mathematical sequence to her sisters. Zora was teaching them words in different languages, her pronunciation flawless. Maya had disassembled a toy electronic keyboard, methodically improving its circuitry with small, deft fingers. In these quiet moments, watching her daughters flourish, Naomi occasionally allowed herself to wonder if Jonathan ever regretted his choice, if he ever considered what and who he had cast aside. The thoughts no longer brought pain, only a distant curiosity. Her home office had gradually transformed into an impromptu lab. After the girls went to bed, Naomi would work for hours at her desk, refining the secure communication system that was becoming her doctoral thesis. Components and circuit boards covered every available surface, while diagrams and sticky notes papered the walls. One particularly late night, as she soldered connections on a prototype, Naomi realized she could expand the system beyond its original military application. With modifications, it could protect civilian infrastructure, corporate networks, even personal communications from sophisticated attacks. The revelation kept her working until dawn, sketching expanded applications and jotting notes about potential markets. When Maya wandered in at 6, rubbing sleep from her eyes, she found her mother surrounded by a constellation of diagrams. "What are you making, Mama?" Maya asked, climbing onto Naomi's lap. "Something to keep people safe," Naomi explained, smoothing her daughter's unruly curls. "Something no one else has thought of yet." Maya studied the circuit board with unusual intensity for a 3-year-old. "It needs a switch here," she said, pointing to a specific junction. Naomi stared at the spot, then back at her daughter. Maya was right. The design would be more efficient with a switch at exactly that position. "How did you know that, sweetheart?" Maya shrugged. "It just looks better that way." 2 weeks later, Naomi's doctoral advisor called her into his office. "The Pentagon is impressed with your progress," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "They're offering to buy exclusive rights to your technology." Naomi opened the folder. The offer was substantial, enough to set up college funds for the girls, buy a comfortable home, establish financial security. "It's generous," she acknowledged. "It's more than generous for someone in your position," he replied. "Single mother, military career ahead of you, this is security." Naomi closed the folder. "What if I want to retain the rights and just license the technology?" Her advisor's eyebrows shot up. "That would be unusual. The military typically prefers exclusive ownership." "I understand, but I've been thinking about civilian applications. This system could protect infrastructure, businesses, personal data." "That's ambitious, Lieutenant." "So was raising triplets while completing basic training," she replied with a small smile. That evening, Naomi sought Beth's counsel, explaining the Pentagon's offer and her hesitation to accept it. "They're offering enough money to change our lives," she admitted. "But if I keep the rights and form my own company, it could be worth exponentially more," Beth finished. "Not to mention the control over your own creation." "Am I crazy to even consider it? Starting a company with 3 4-year-olds and no business experience?" Beth leaned back in her chair. "My father used to say the difference between recklessness and courage is preparation. You're the most prepared person I know." The next day, Naomi did what had once seemed unthinkable. She declined the Pentagon's offer. Instead, she proposed a licensing arrangement that would allow the military to use her technology while she retained ownership and the right to develop civilian applications. After weeks of negotiation, they reached an agreement. The licensing fees would provide enough capital to launch her own venture while maintaining the security her family needed. In the following months, Naomi devoted every spare moment to research. She studied business formation, technology startups, patent law, and venture capital. Her dining table disappeared under stacks of books and printouts, while her laptop filled with business plans and market analyses. Late one night, as she was completing the patent application for her technology, Naomi realized she needed a name for her company, something that would reflect both her journey and her vision. The girls had left crayoned drawings scattered across the table. Amelia's showed a mathematical pattern, Zora's had words in multiple languages, and Maya's depicted a detailed machine. In the corner of Maya's drawing was a simple shield. Robinson Defense Systems, Naomi whispered to herself. A company built to protect, founded on the strength she'd discovered when she had nothing else. The following week, with Beth by her side for moral support, Naomi visited the patent office. The clerk looked skeptical as she explained her innovation, a reaction she'd grown accustomed to, but accepted her meticulously prepared application. "How long until approval?" she asked. 6 to 18 months, he replied, "if there are no complications." Those months became a blur of activity. Naomi completed her doctorate with highest honors, transitioned to reserve status in the Army as Captain Robinson, and began the complex process of establishing her company. The Triplets, now 4 years old, started a preschool program for gifted children, where they continued to astonish teachers with their abilities. When the patent was finally approved, Naomi received an unexpected call from the Department of Defense. "Captain Robinson, we've reviewed your patent and would like to discuss purchasing exclusive rights," the voice on the phone explained. "We're prepared to make a very generous offer." Naomi smiled to herself. "I appreciate the interest, but I'm planning to license the technology while retaining the rights. I don't think you understand the opportunity here. The DoD is offering to employ you directly as lead engineer. Full benefits, pension, security." "Thank you, but I've decided to build something of my own," she replied firmly. "Something for my daughters." After hanging up, Naomi sat at her desk, momentarily questioning her decision. The safe path would be accepting the government position, the guaranteed salary, the established career track, the predictability. But as she looked at the photos of her daughters on her desk, Amelia's serious expression, Zora's confident smile, Maya's thoughtful gaze, she knew she was making the right choice. They deserved to see their mother build something extraordinary, just as they were extraordinary. That night, after tucking the girls into bed, Naomi spread the incorporation papers for Robinson Defense Systems across her kitchen table. With a steady hand, she signed her name on each document, officially establishing the company that would one day revolutionize cybersecurity. As she filed the papers in her newly purchased safe, she took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. From a snowy night with nothing but a positive pregnancy test and $20 to founding her own technology company. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was no stranger to impossible odds. While Naomi signed the documents creating her company, she didn't know she was taking the first step to build an empire that would not only change the defense industry, but that would one day make Jonathan Pierce beg for a partnership she would refuse with a simple and satisfying no. The first step to build an empire had been taken, but the journey ahead would prove far more challenging than signing incorporation papers. 2 years passed in a blur of sleepless nights, rejection letters, and hard-won small victories. Naomi, now 29 and a captain in the Army Reserve, sat in her tiny rented office space, phone pressed to her ear as she absorbed yet another setback. "I understand," she said, maintaining professional composure despite the familiar sting of rejection. "Thank you for considering Robinson Defense Systems." She hung up and allowed herself precisely 10 seconds of disappointment before straightening her shoulders. The triplets would be finishing school soon, and she needed to compartmentalize this rejection before picking them up. The Robinson Defense Systems headquarters was far from impressive, a small suite in a weathered office building on the outskirts of Manhattan. The reception area doubled as a playroom when the girls visited after school, colorful educational toys carefully arranged beside professional trade journals. Naomi's desk occupied one corner of the main room, while a conference table that had seen better days dominated the center. The only truly modern equipment was the prototype security system humming quietly in a reinforced cabinet. "Another no?" asked Sharon, Naomi's sole employee, a retired military communications specialist who had taken a chance on the fledgling company. "Apparently they went in another direction," Naomi replied, the euphemism all too familiar. What the investor hadn't said, but what his dismissive glances and pointed questions had made clear, was that he couldn't envision entrusting millions to a young black woman with no family connections or Ivy League pedigree. At 5 o'clock, Naomi arrived at Bright Horizons Academy, the public school where the triplets had started kindergarten 3 months earlier. Even among gifted children, the Robinson girls stood out dramatically. Their teacher, Ms. Powell, waved Naomi into the classroom while the girls finished their independent projects. "Mrs. Robinson," Ms. Powell began. "Captain Robinson or Ms. Robinson, please," Naomi corrected gently but firmly. She had stopped using any form of Jonathan's name the day the divorce was finalized. "Of course, my apologies," the teacher said. "I wanted to discuss the girls' recent assessments. They're quite exceptional, even for our accelerated program." Naomi watched her daughters across the room. Amelia was hunched over a worksheet, solving complex mathematical equations meant for children 3 grades ahead. Zora sat in the reading corner, devouring a chapter book while simultaneously teaching a classmate how to count in Japanese. Maya had disassembled the classroom clock and was methodically improving its mechanism with small modifications. "Amelia completed our entire semester's math curriculum in 3 weeks, Ms. Powell explained, showing Naomi a folder of perfect worksheets. "Zora is functioning as our unofficial interpreter. She helped a new Russian student adjust by learning basic Russian phrases overnight. And Maya..." The teacher glanced toward the girl who was now reassembling the clock. "She fixed our computer lab's server after the IT department said it needed replacement." Pride swelled in Naomi's chest, momentarily displacing the day's frustrations. "They're determined little girls." "They're extraordinary," Ms. Powell corrected. "Have you considered private schools with more advanced programs?" Naomi had researched every elite academy in the tri-state area, calculated tuition costs against her precarious finances, and concluded it was currently impossible. "We're exploring options," she answered diplomatically. That evening, after a dinner of budget-friendly pasta, the girls worked on homework at the kitchen table while Naomi reviewed potential investor pitches. Beth, now officially Robinson Defense Systems Director of Security, arrived with groceries and updates from her day overseeing the installation of the office's new security protocols. "The girls have a school presentation tomorrow," Naomi remembered suddenly. "I have that meeting with Westlake Partners at 9. "I'll take them," Beth offered immediately. "You nail that investor meeting." Naomi shot her a grateful look. Single motherhood would have been impossible without such support. If Westlake signs, we could actually make payroll next quarter without dipping into savings. The following morning, Naomi dressed in her most professional outfit, a navy suit purchased second-hand but impeccably tailored. Her military training showed in her posture as she entered the gleaming midtown skyscraper that housed Westlake Partners, a venture capital firm known for backing defense technology startups. The reception area screamed old money, mahogany paneling, oil paintings of stern-faced founders, leather chairs that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The receptionist's smile turned noticeably cooler upon seeing Naomi. "I have a 9 o'clock with Mr. Westlake," Naomi stated confidently, refusing to be intimidated. The meeting began promisingly. Roger Westlake and his partners seemed genuinely interested in her secure communication system, asking detailed technical questions that Naomi answered with precision and expertise. The atmosphere shifted subtly when they moved from technology to business structure. "This is fascinating technology, Ms. Robinson," Westlake said, leaning back in his chair. "Who else is on your development team?" "I developed the system myself," Naomi replied. "I hold the patents." Eyebrows raised around the table. "And who handles the business side?" asked another partner. "Your husband?" Naomi maintained her composure, though the question ignited a familiar anger. "I'm the CEO as well as the chief engineer. I'm not married." "Ambitious," Westlake commented, his tone making the word sound like a character flaw. "And you have children, correct? How do you manage it all?" The question, one never asked of male entrepreneurs, hung in the air. Naomi resisted the urge to point out the double standard. "I manage my time efficiently," she replied instead. "My children are my inspiration, not a hindrance." The meeting ended with handshakes and vague promises to be in touch. Naomi recognized the polite dismissal for what it was. Walking back to her office through crowded Manhattan streets, she fought against discouragement. 27 investor meetings in 18 months, and still no significant funding. When she arrived at the office, Sharon was waiting with an odd expression. "You had a visitor while you were out. He wouldn't leave his name, but he asked very specific questions about our technology and your background." Alarm bells rang in Naomi's mind. What did he look like? Expensively dressed, very corporate, said he represented a potential investor. A suspicion formed in Naomi's mind. She pulled up her laptop and searched recent Pierce Investments activities. There it was, a new technology acquisition division focused on security startups. It was him, she murmured, or someone working for him. That evening, Colonel James Harris, her former commanding officer, called with disturbing news. "I heard through the grapevine that someone's been asking questions about your patents. Thought you should know." "Thank you, sir. I had a strange visitor today. Be careful, Robinson. There are sharks in those waters who'd rather buy you out for pennies than compete with you." The next morning brought confirmation in the form of an email from an anonymous corporate acquisition firm offering to purchase Robinson Defense Systems for a fraction of its potential value. The wording was carefully generic, but Naomi recognized the strategy. It matched Jonathan's business playbook perfectly. She drafted a single-sentence reply: "Robinson Defense Systems is not for sale at any price." Her finger hovered over the send button when another email arrived, this one from Roger Westlake, regretfully declining to invest. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Somehow Jonathan had discovered her company and was working to either acquire it cheaply or ensure she couldn't secure funding elsewhere. Beth found her staring at the computer screen, fists clenched in rare, visible anger. "What happened?" Naomi explained her suspicions. "He's trying to sabotage me. Again. Can he do that? Legally?" "It's all perfectly legal corporate maneuvering," Naomi replied bitterly. "He's just making sure potential investors hear certain things about a risky venture run by a single mother with no business experience." Beth's expression hardened. "So what's the plan, Captain?" The military address centered Naomi, reminding her of who she had become. "We pivot. If traditional investors won't back us, we find alternatives." That afternoon, Naomi began contacting her military network, former colleagues, superior officers, veterans who had transitioned to the private sector, people who knew her capabilities firsthand, who had seen her innovations in action. 3 days later, she sat in a different conference room, this one at a veteran-owned security consulting firm in Virginia. Around the table were 5 former military officers, each now running successful businesses. "Wall Street doesn't understand what we do," said Margaret Chen, a retired colonel who had worked with Naomi on a communications project. "They want Ivy League MBAs who speak their language, but we understand your technology's value." By meeting's end, Naomi had secured her first significant investment, $5 million from a consortium of veteran-owned businesses who recognized the potential of her system. The funding wasn't from glamorous venture capitalists, but from people who had served alongside her and trusted her expertise implicitly. 1 month later, Robinson Defense Systems signed its first major government contract, providing secure communication technology for a classified defense initiative. The contract value was modest by industry standards, but revolutionary for Naomi's small company. The evening after signing, Naomi hosted a small celebration at her apartment. Beth brought pizza and cake, while Sharon and her husband arrived with sparkling cider for a toast. The triplets, now 5 years old, wore paper crowns they had made themselves, decorated with mathematical formulas, Amelia, words in multiple languages, Zora, and intricate mechanical drawings, Maya. To Robinson Defense Systems, Beth toasted, raising her glass, and to its brilliant founder who never gave up. The girls clinked their juice boxes against the adults' glasses. To Mama's company, they chorused. Later, after putting the excited girls to bed with promises that yes, they could visit the office tomorrow, and no, they couldn't take apart the new server equipment, Naomi sat on their bedroom floor watching them sleep. Their peaceful faces, so similar yet distinct, filled her with renewed determination. "I'm building something that can't be taken away," she whispered. "Something that will be yours someday." In their sleep, the triplets shifted in unison, as if responding to her promise. The next morning brought news that their government contract had been covered in a small industry publication. Most people would never see the brief mention, but it was enough to establish Robinson Defense Systems as a legitimate player in the defense technology sector. Naomi pinned the article to her office wall, the first tangible recognition of what she was building. Beside it, she placed a new photograph of herself with the triplets, all four smiling proudly at the camera. As she filed the signed contract in her office safe, Naomi couldn't know that in just 2 years her technology would become essential for national security, transforming Robinson Defense Systems into one of the fastest-growing companies in history, exactly when Jonathan would be desperately seeking innovation to save his own empire. In just 2 years, Naomi's technology had indeed become essential for national security. Standing at the window of her newly acquired offices on the 40th floor of a gleaming Manhattan skyscraper, she watched the morning sun reflect off the glass buildings surrounding her. The view of Central Park in the distance reminded her of another view, from another life, a penthouse where she had once stood, hopeful and pregnant, waiting for a man who would discard her like something worthless. "Captain Robinson?" Her executive assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board members are assembled in the conference room." "Thank you, Alex. I'll be right there." At 31, Naomi Robinson carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had overcome impossible odds. Her tailored Armani suit, purchased new, not second-hand, complemented her athletic frame, honed by years of military discipline and maintained despite her punishing work schedule. As she gathered her presentation materials, she caught her reflection in the glass door. The woman who looked back at her, confident, accomplished, unbroken, bore little resemblance to the frightened young woman who had dragged a suitcase through the snow 4 years ago. The conference room of Robinson Defense Systems headquarters embodied the company's meteoric rise. Smart glass walls could switch from transparent to opaque with a voice command. The massive table was crafted from sustainable materials, its surface embedded with touchscreen technology. Around it sat 12 board members, retired generals, tech innovators, and industry veterans who had recognized Naomi's vision when traditional investors wouldn't. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and authoritative. "Third-quarter numbers exceeded projections by 28%. Our new cybersecurity platform has been adopted by 6 federal agencies, and we've received inquiries from 3 allied nations." The presentation continued with the precision of a military briefing. No wasted words, no false modesty. Just facts that told the story of a company that had grown from a tiny office with mismatched furniture to a powerhouse valued at $1.2 billion. "Questions?" Naomi asked after concluding her presentation. Admiral Wilson, a board member who had initially been the most skeptical of her leadership, leaned forward. "The growth trajectory is remarkable, even by tech industry standards. What's your secret, Captain?" Naomi allowed herself a small smile. "No secret, Admiral. Just excellent technology and a team that doesn't understand the concept of impossible." After the meeting, Naomi took the private elevator to the 39th floor, a space specifically designed for her most precious priority. Unlike most corporate headquarters, Robinson Defense Systems featured a full educational facility for employees' children. For the triplets, now 7 years old, it provided the advanced instruction their extraordinary minds required. The doors opened to a vibrant space filled with cutting-edge learning technology. In one corner, Amelia stood before a holographic display, manipulating complex geometric shapes with confidence that belied her age. Across the room, Zora conversed fluently with the language instructor, in what sounded like Mandarin today. Near the science station, Maya had disassembled what appeared to be a small drone, methodically improving its design. "Mom!" Amelia spotted her first, abandoning her equations to rush across the room. Her sisters followed immediately, creating the familiar whirlwind of energy that was 3 identical girls moving in unison. "How was the board meeting?" Zora asked, her vocabulary remarkably sophisticated for a 7-year-old. "Did they like the new security protocols?" Maya added, her hands still holding drone components. Naomi embraced them, marveling as always at how they had inherited her analytical mind along with Jonathan's features, a combination that sometimes caught her off guard when they asked particularly insightful questions or tilted their heads in a gesture reminiscent of their biological father. "The meeting went perfectly," she assured them. "How's the special project coming along?" The girls exchanged excited glances. For their science competition, they had combined their unique talents: Amelia's mathematical precision, Zora's communication skills, and Maya's engineering intuition to create an educational robot designed to teach refugee children basic language skills. "We fixed the voice recognition problem," Amelia announced proudly. "It can now process 8 languages," Zora added. "And I made the interface more intuitive for kids who've never used technology," Maya finished. Later that afternoon, Naomi left work early, a non-negotiable practice on days when the girls had special events. Today was the state mathematics competition, where Amelia was representing her school. In the auditorium of the prestigious private academy the triplets now attended, Naomi sat in the front row, watching with undisguised pride as Amelia approached the complex problem on the electronic board. Her daughter's small fingers moved confidently across the screen, breaking down an equation that would challenge most college students. When she finished, 2 minutes ahead of her nearest competitor, the judges exchanged astonished glances before confirming her perfect solution. The winner of the state championship, Amelia Robinson. The audience applauded as Amelia accepted her trophy, searching the crowd immediately for her mother's face. Naomi's throat tightened with emotion as she gave her daughter a thumbs up. 2 weeks later, it was Zora's turn to shine. The International Cultural Exchange Program had selected her presentation on global communication barriers as their featured project. Standing before diplomats and educators from 12 countries, Zora delivered her speech in 4 different languages, switching seamlessly between them to demonstrate her points about cross-cultural understanding. "My mother taught me that communication builds bridges," she concluded, her voice clear and confident despite the prestigious audience. "And bridges connect worlds that once seemed impossibly far apart." The following month brought Maya's moment, the regional robotics fair where her functional prosthetic hand design earned not only first place but also the attention of medical technology companies. When asked by an impressed judge where she had learned such advanced engineering concepts, Maya had answered simply, "My mom shows me that if you can imagine something better, you can build it." Between these triumphs, Naomi balanced the expanding demands of her company with her unwavering commitment to being present for her daughters. Her calendar contained blocks marked in red, school performances, doctor appointments, family dinners that were sacrosanct, immovable regardless of what business crisis might arise. "The investors from Tokyo are requesting a meeting on Thursday afternoon," Alex informed her one morning. Naomi glanced at her calendar. "Thursday is Maya's robotics presentation. Reschedule them for Friday morning." "They specifically requested, then they can specifically adjust," Naomi interrupted firmly. "My personal calendar is non-negotiable." This philosophy had become part of Robinson Defense Systems' corporate culture, a recognition that success meant nothing if achieved at the expense of what truly mattered. The company offered generous parental leave, flexible schedules, and the innovative on-site education center that had become a model for other forward-thinking corporations. The development team had just completed their most ambitious project yet, a revolutionary cybersecurity system that could adapt to emerging threats in real time, protecting even the most vulnerable networks from sophisticated attacks. Early testing had exceeded all expectations, and the patent application was already filed. Every major corporation will want this technology, Beth observed during their strategy meeting. She had transitioned from Director of Security to Chief Operations Officer, her military efficiency proving invaluable as the company expanded. "The licensing potential is unprecedented," agreed Sharon, now heading the legal department. "We've already received preliminary inquiries from half the Fortune 500. One of those inquiries, Naomi noted with interest, had come from Pierce Investments. The company's technology acquisition division had sent a particularly eager request, citing strategic synergies and mutually beneficial opportunities. She had instructed Sharon to respond with the same standard information packet sent to all other interested parties, neither prioritizing nor dismissing them based on her personal history. That evening, as Naomi helped the girls with their homework at the dining table of their Park Avenue apartment, Beth called with unexpected news. "The Forbes team confirmed. You'll be on the July cover as Entrepreneur of the Year. They want to do the photo shoot at the Independence Day event at One World Trade Center." Naomi set down her pen, momentarily speechless. The recognition was significant, not just for her, but for what it represented. A woman of color who had started with nothing, building a billion-dollar company while raising 3 children alone. The kind of story that might inspire others facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles. "That's wonderful news," she finally responded. "Can the girls come? I promised to take them somewhere special to watch the fireworks." "Absolutely. In fact, the editor thinks it would be perfect to include them. Your story as a single mother and entrepreneur will inspire millions." After hanging up, Naomi found the triplets watching her with curious expressions. "What's Forbes?" Amelia asked. "It's an important business magazine," Naomi explained. "They want to put my picture on the cover." "Because you're the best CEO," Maya stated with the absolute confidence of a 7-year-old. "Because you built something amazing from nothing," Zora added thoughtfully. Their faith in her had been unwavering from the beginning, from the days when office meant a tiny rented room with second-hand furniture, through each incremental success, to this moment of widespread recognition. Their belief had sustained her through countless rejections, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. The following day, while reviewing licensing requests for their new security system, Naomi received a call from her licensing director. "Several corporations are interested in our new system, but Pierce Investments is offering double the value for exclusivity." The name still caused a momentary tightening in her stomach, but her voice remained steady. "Decline. We don't do exclusive agreements." That night, standing at her apartment window overlooking Park Avenue, Naomi gazed at the city that had once rejected her, now seemingly at her feet. The woman reflected in the glass, hair elegantly braided, body sculpted by years of military training, eyes bearing the quiet confidence of someone who had faced the impossible and won, had nothing in common with the frightened young woman who had been expelled from her home on a snowy night. While looking through the July issue layouts her PR team had sent over, Naomi couldn't know that the Forbes photo shoot at the Independence Day celebration would bring her face to face with Jonathan Pierce for the first time in years, and that the encounter would dramatically alter both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The Forbes photo shoot at the Independence Day celebration would indeed bring Naomi face to face with Jonathan Pierce, though neither could have anticipated the dramatic confrontation that would unfold. The morning of July 4th dawned clear and bright, a perfect summer day in New York City. Naomi stood in her spacious Park Avenue bedroom surveying the 3 dresses laid out on her bed, one white, one blue, one red. "Girls, are you ready?" she called out, fastening diamond studs in her ears, real ones now, purchased with her first major contract, a personal reminder of how far she had come. The triplets bounded into the room, already dressed in their patriotic-themed outfits. Amelia in white, Zora in red, and Maya in blue, a coordinated ensemble they had planned themselves for the special occasion. "You look beautiful, Mama," Zora said, admiring Naomi's elegant navy dress uniform, complete with her captain's bars and service medals. "Is that what you wore in the army?" Maya asked, reaching out to touch one of the gleaming medals on her mother's chest. "Yes," Naomi smiled, kneeling to adjust Maya's collar. "I thought it was appropriate for today. The Forbes team wanted some photos with me in uniform." Amelia, always the most perceptive, studied her mother's face. "You're nervous. Why? You talk to important people all the time." Naomi considered deflecting, but had always believed in being honest with her daughters. "This photo shoot means a lot. It's recognition not just for me, but for what we've built together. It matters that people see someone who looks like us succeeding this way." The private car service arrived precisely at 6:30, whisking them through Manhattan streets that were already filling with holiday revelers. As they approached the One World Trade Center, its glass facade shimmering in the early evening light, Naomi felt a momentary trepidation. She had checked the guest list for the exclusive rooftop celebration and hadn't seen Jonathan's name, but something in her intuition, the same instinct that had guided her business decisions, whispered caution. "Remember your manners tonight," she told the girls as they rode the express elevator to the observation deck. "There will be many important people at this event." "Will they ask us questions?" Zora wondered, always eager to engage with new people. "Probably," Naomi answered. "Just be yourselves. That's all anyone needs to see." The elevator doors opened to reveal the transformed rooftop. American flags hung from every possible surface, and red, white, and blue lights illuminated the space. A string quartet played patriotic melodies in one corner, while waitstaff in formal attire circulated with champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the entire city spread out below, waiting for darkness to fall and the fireworks to begin. The Forbes photography team spotted Naomi immediately, rushing over with professional enthusiasm. "Captain Robinson, perfect timing. The light is magnificent right now," the photographer gushed, directing them toward a spot with the city skyline as backdrop. "And these must be your amazing daughters we've heard so much about." As the session began, Naomi relaxed into the familiar routine of a media appearance. The girls, accustomed to their mother's growing public profile, posed naturally, their identical faces lit with genuine smiles. In her uniform, with her daughters surrounding her, Naomi embodied exactly what the magazine wanted: strength, success, and family. An American dream realized against tremendous odds. Across the rooftop, unnoticed by Naomi, Jonathan Pierce stood near the bar, his hand tightening around a crystal tumbler of bourbon. At 35, he remained strikingly handsome, though faint lines around his eyes hinted at the pressure of maintaining the Pierce Investments empire. Beside him, Vanessa Holbrook, his fiancée of 6 months, adjusted her diamond engagement ring, a massive emerald-cut stone that caught the light with every movement. "Darling, who are you looking at?" Vanessa asked, following his suddenly fixed gaze. Jonathan couldn't answer. His attention was entirely captured by the scene unfolding across the room: a woman in military dress uniform, surrounded by 3 identical young girls. A woman whose profile, even at this distance, sent a jolt of recognition through him. "It can't be," he muttered, setting down his drink. "Jonathan?" Vanessa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together in confusion. He ignored her, signaling to the event coordinator. "The military woman with the Forbes team. Who is that?" The coordinator consulted her tablet. Captain Naomi Robinson, CEO of Robinson Defense Systems. She's their Entrepreneur of the Year cover story. Jonathan felt the floor shift beneath him. Robinson Defense Systems, the innovative security firm that had recently rejected his company's generous acquisition offer. The company whose revolutionary technology Pierce Investments desperately needed to remain competitive. That was Naomi's company? Before he could process this information, a staff member approached the center of the room, tapping a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jonathan Pierce would like to say a few words on behalf of tonight's sponsors." Jonathan mechanically moved toward the small platform, professional instinct taking over despite his inner turmoil. He took the microphone, scanning the crowd that now included Naomi, who had frozen in place upon hearing his name. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his boarding school accent more pronounced after several bourbons. "On behalf of Pierce Investments, I'd like to welcome you to our annual Independence Day celebration." The crowd applauded politely as Jonathan continued with practiced charm. "America is the land of opportunity, where vision and determination create success. My success, of course," he added with a self-satisfied smile that earned indulgent chuckles from the wealthy audience, "is due to my ability to recognize real value. That's why I associate only with successful women." He raised his glass toward Vanessa, "unlike that mistake from my past." The words hung in the air just as the distinctive sound of elevator doors opening cut through the awkward silence that followed. All heads turned toward the new arrival. Naomi stood in the elevator doorway, her military posture perfect, her uniform immaculate, medals gleaming under the lights. Behind her, the three girls peered curiously into the room, their identical faces framed by neatly styled curls. The photographer, sensing a perfect moment, began capturing images as Jonathan's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. His face drained of color as if he'd seen a ghost. In many ways, he had. The woman before him bore little resemblance to the desperate, heartbroken young teacher he'd discarded. This Naomi radiated power, confidence, and success. "Naomi," he whispered, the name barely audible. The triplets looked simultaneously toward him, their matched expressions curious and evaluative. Then Amelia, always the one to speak first, pointed directly at Jonathan. "Look, Mama, is that the man from the photo you said is our father?" Her clear, childish voice carried perfectly in the suddenly silent room. Guests froze mid-conversation, sensing the unfolding drama. The Forbes photographers, recognizing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, discreetly continued shooting. Naomi maintained her composure, guiding her daughters into the room with gentle hands on their shoulders. "Yes, Amelia, that's him." Jonathan crossed the room with unsteady steps, his customary grace abandoned. A forced smile stretched across his pale face as he extended his hand toward Naomi. "Naomi, what an unexpected pleasure. Perhaps we could speak privately about this. Misunderstanding?" He tilted his head toward the girls, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "There's nothing to discuss in private," Naomi replied, her voice calm but carrying enough to be heard by nearby guests. "These are your daughters, Jonathan, Amelia, Zora, and Maya, three geniuses you chose not to know, who already speak 3 languages and are being recruited by the finest preparatory schools in the country." The triplets observed Jonathan with identical analytical gazes, their eyes, his eyes, studying him with unsettling directness. Vanessa approached, confusion and growing horror dawning on her flawless features. "Jonathan, what's happening? Who are these people?" Before he could formulate a response, Maya reached into her small purse and withdrew a mechanical device about the size of a mouse. She set it on a nearby table and pressed a button. The tiny robot came to life, methodically moving across the surface, collecting crumbs from abandoned hors d'oeuvres. "I built him myself," she announced proudly, looking up at Jonathan. "Why did you leave us before we were even born?" The guests nearest them fell silent, straining to hear. Several investors discreetly took out phones, typing rapidly. "This is ridiculous," Jonathan said, his voice rising with desperation. "Naomi, you can't just appear after years and make accusations." "They aren't accusations, they're facts," she interrupted calmly. "And I didn't come here for you. I was invited by Forbes for their cover photo shoot as Entrepreneur of the Year." She gestured toward the photographers who continued documenting every moment. "Running into you was mere coincidence." A distinguished older man pushed forward from the crowd, his excitement palpable. "Captain Robinson, your company is Robinson Defense Systems? We've been trying to connect with you about licensing your new technology." Jonathan's head snapped toward Naomi, his expression shifting from embarrassment to shock. "You're the founder of RDS, the cybersecurity company?" "I'm the insufficient woman who built a company valued at $1.2 billion while raising 3 exceptional daughters," Naomi stated matter-of-factly. "You're just the man who lost the chance to be part of it all." Vanessa looked from Jonathan to the triplets, understanding blooming in her eyes. "You abandoned a pregnant woman? With triplets?" The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Jonathan loosened his tie, visibly sweating now. The flashbulbs intensified as Zora tugged at Naomi's sleeve, her voice carrying in the awkward silence. "Mama, is this the man you said didn't have a heart big enough to love a family?" Several guests gasped audibly. A prominent venture capitalist who had been speaking with Jonathan earlier stepped away, making a show of checking his watch and excusing himself. "Naomi, please," Jonathan hissed, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can discuss this like adults. There's obviously been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding was mine, 7 years ago, when I believed you loved me," Naomi replied, her voice steady. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we came to see the fireworks and complete our photo shoot, not to revisit ancient history." She guided the girls toward the Forbes team, who had positioned themselves near the windows overlooking the harbor where the fireworks would soon begin. The crowd parted for them, many faces showing open admiration for Naomi and barely concealed contempt for Jonathan. As the photographers positioned Naomi and the triplets against the backdrop of the darkening sky, the first brilliant explosions of red and blue illuminated their faces. The cameras captured not just the physical resemblance between the girls and their biological father, but the unmistakable bond between the 4 Robinsons, a family complete without the man who had once deemed them unworthy. While the photographers captured these powerful images, no one could predict that the morning headlines would feature not just Naomi's planned Forbes cover, but the dramatic confrontation that would send Pierce Investments stock plummeting and seal Jonathan's reputation as the man who had discarded the most valuable treasures life had offered him. The flashbulbs illuminated Naomi's composed face against the backdrop of exploding fireworks, capturing a moment of perfect symmetry, her 3 daughters arrayed before her like living proof of her triumph. Meanwhile, across the rooftop, Jonathan stood frozen, the shards of his shattered champagne glass still scattered around his Italian leather shoes. "Perhaps we should continue this somewhere else," the Forbes photographer suggested, eyeing the growing crowd of curious onlookers. "The lighting by the West Terrace would be perfect with the fireworks." Naomi nodded, guiding her daughters away from the spectacle they had inadvertently created. As they moved through the crowd, people stepped aside, their expressions a mixture of awe and intrigue. The whispers had already begun, phones discreetly raised to capture images that would soon race across social media. Jonathan lunged forward, desperation overriding his usual calculated demeanor. "Naomi, wait! Your champagne, sir," a server interrupted, offering a replacement for his dropped glass. The momentary distraction allowed Naomi and the girls to slip further away. Jonathan pushed past the server, ignoring Vanessa's confused calls behind him. "I need 5 minutes," he said, catching up to Naomi at the edge of the terrace. His voice had lost its boardroom authority, replaced by something dangerously close to pleading. "Just 5 minutes to understand what's happening." Naomi turned, her military posture making her appear taller than her 5'7" frame. "What's happening is a Forbes photo shoot that you're interrupting." Amelia stepped forward, her analytical gaze fixed on Jonathan's face. "You look different from your pictures. Older." Jonathan's composure cracked further at being so directly addressed by a child who was unmistakably his. The same determined chin, the same arched eyebrows, like looking at a feminized version of his childhood photographs. Yes, I suppose I am," he stammered, unused to being off script. "Are you really our biological father?" Zora asked, her articulation perfect despite her young age. Mom explained about donors and genetics. Maya remained silent, studying the mechanical aspects of his watch instead of his face. Jonathan swallowed hard. This isn't the appropriate setting for this conversation. "That's the first sensible thing you've said," Naomi interjected. "Girls, please go with Ms. Edwards from Forbes for a moment while I speak with Mr. Pierce." The triplets looked at each other, communicating in that silent way identical siblings often do, then obediently followed the magazine's assistant to a nearby table laden with desserts. Once they were out of earshot, Jonathan's desperation surfaced fully. "Triplets? You had triplets and never told me?" Naomi's laugh was cold. "I didn't tell you? Your lawyers sent me paperwork denying paternity while I was still in the hospital recovering from an emergency C-section. The same lawyers who arranged for a $5,000 compassionate payment that I tore up. I wasn't thinking clearly then. I was young, focused on the company." "Save it," Naomi cut him off. "We're not doing this now. Not here, not ever. You made your choice 7 years ago when you called me a charity project and had security escort me out during a snowstorm." Vanessa appeared at Jonathan's elbow, her expression hardened from confusion into disgust. "Jonathan, everyone is staring. We need to address this situation." "Address this situation?" he repeated numbly. "Yes. These children, are they really yours?" Her voice dropped to a fierce whisper. Before Jonathan could respond, an older man in an expensive suit approached, recognition dawning on his face as he looked between Jonathan and the triplets in the distance. "Pierce, I didn't realize you had children," he said, extending his hand. "Beautiful girls. They must take after their mother in intellect, given what I've heard about Robinson Defense Systems. Quite the revolutionary technology they've developed." Jonathan struggled to maintain his public persona. "We're not, that is, I haven't been involved." Jonathan chose not to be involved in their lives, Naomi supplied smoothly. "Mr. Harrington, Thomas Harrington, Meridian Investments." He shook Naomi's hand with obvious respect. "We've been trying to connect with your company about the new cybersecurity platform. Perhaps we could schedule a proper meeting? My office will contact you tomorrow," Naomi replied professionally. As Harrington walked away, Vanessa's perfectly manicured hand gripped Jonathan's arm with unexpected strength. "You abandoned your pregnant wife? With triplets?" Her voice was low but intense. "The same man who lectured me last week about family values being important to the Pierce brand?" "It was complicated," Jonathan muttered. "Apparently not," Vanessa countered, removing her hand from his arm and taking a deliberate step backward. "It seems quite simple. You threw away a woman who went on to build $1 billion company while raising your children alone." The investors who had been hovering nearby exchanged meaningful glances. One whispered something to his companion, who nodded gravely. Jonathan recognized the expression. It was the same one board members wore when discussing a CEO who had become a liability. "Naomi," he tried again, "we need to discuss this privately, for the girls' sake." "The girls have been perfectly fine without you for 7 years," she responded. "They attend the best schools, have excellent health care, and more opportunities than most children could dream of. What exactly do you think they need from you now?" One of the Forbes photographers approached cautiously. "Captain Robinson? We'd like to get a few more shots before the fireworks finale." "Of course," Naomi agreed, clearly dismissing Jonathan. As she walked away, Jonathan found himself surrounded by curious glances and whispered comments. The narrative was forming before his eyes. Successful military officer and single mother builds empire while heartless ex abandons her with triplets. It was public relations nightmare of epic proportions. Near the dessert table, the triplets were charming the Forbes staff with their precocious intelligence. Maya had already taken apart a small electronic tea light and was explaining to a fascinated editor how she had improved its battery efficiency. "Your daughters are remarkable," an elderly board member of a prominent bank commented to Jonathan, who hadn't realized the man had approached. "You must be devastated to have missed their early years." The comment, delivered with thinly veiled judgment, struck deeper than Jonathan expected. For the first time, he actually looked at the girls, really looked at them. Their confident postures, their articulate speech, their obvious intelligence, all developed without him, despite him. "I need to fix this," he muttered, more to himself than his companion. "Some things can't be fixed, young man," the banker replied. "Some opportunities once missed are gone forever." Across the room, Naomi posed against the Manhattan skyline, her uniform crisp, her expression confident. The fireworks behind her punctuated the scene with bursts of red and blue. The triplets rejoined her, arranging themselves naturally around their mother. They moved as a unit, a complete family circle with no gaps, no missing pieces. The banker's words echoed in Jonathan's mind as he watched them. These weren't just public relations problems to be managed. These were human beings, his daughters, who had grown up without him by his choice. As the final barrage of fireworks illuminated the sky, the photographers captured what would become the iconic cover image: Naomi standing tall in her dress uniform, three brilliant daughters arrayed before her, the New York skyline and fireworks creating a perfect patriotic backdrop. The image of American success, determination, and family strength. The celebration began winding down shortly after the fireworks concluded. Naomi and the girls prepared to leave, surrounded by admirers and business contacts exchanging cards and promises of future meetings. Jonathan watched from a distance, Vanessa having disappeared 20 minutes earlier after a terse, "We'll discuss this tomorrow." In a last desperate attempt, he intercepted Naomi near the elevator. "Please," he said quietly, "just tell me how I can be part of their lives." Naomi's expression remained neutral. "That's not my decision to make anymore. They're old enough to understand who you are and why you weren't there. If they want to know you someday, I won't stand in the way. But I won't force them either." "They're my daughters too," he insisted. "Biology doesn't make a father," she replied, echoing her words to Beth years earlier. "Being there does. Good night, Jonathan." The elevator doors closed on the image of Naomi and the triplets, a complete family unit that had formed and flourished without him. The following morning brought exactly the headlines Jonathan had feared. His phone began ringing at 6. His assistant's voice strained as she reported that several news outlets were requesting statements. By 7, his publicist had texted an emergency meeting request. By 8, his executive team had convened in the Pierce Investments conference room, faces grim as they reviewed the morning's coverage. "CEO abandons pregnant wife with triplets, reunites with her as billionaire," screamed the New York Post's front page, alongside a perfectly timed photograph of Jonathan's shocked expression when he first saw Naomi. The Wall Street Journal took a more measured approach with "Pierce Investments CEO faces questions after family revelations," but the damage was equally severe. "3 major investors have requested emergency meetings," his CFO reported. "Williamson Capital has already postponed our partnership announcement." Vanessa's publicist released a statement an hour ago, his assistant added, sliding a tablet across the table. "She's re-evaluating her relationship status in light of troubling revelations about Mr. Pierce's character and past decisions." Jonathan stared at the screen, where social media was erupting with side-by-side comparisons of his luxury lifestyle and quotes from business speeches where he'd emphasized integrity and family values alongside speculation about Naomi's remarkable journey from abandoned pregnant wife to military officer and CEO. "What do we do?" asked the head of public relations, looking genuinely at a loss. Jonathan had no answer. For the first time in his privileged life, he faced a problem that couldn't be solved with money, connections, or clever PR strategies. This wasn't just a business crisis, it was a moral reckoning playing out on a public stage. His phone buzzed with yet another call from Vanessa, which he ignored as he had the previous 5. The engagement that had been featured in Town and Country just last month now appeared to be another casualty of the previous night's revelations. While Pierce Investments executives scrambled to contain the damage, across town at Robinson Defense Systems headquarters, Naomi conducted her morning meeting with characteristic efficiency. The company's stock had risen 7% in pre-market trading, and requests for partnerships and interviews flooded in hourly. The triplets attended their regular classes at the Academy for Gifted Children, where teachers had been instructed to maintain their normal routine despite the media attention. For Naomi, this wasn't about triumph or revenge. It was simply the culmination of years of hard work, determination, and unwavering focus on building a future for herself and her daughters. The fact that Jonathan Pierce was facing the consequences of his actions was incidental, a footnote in her story rather than its purpose. While the media storm surrounding the Independence Day confrontation brought headlines that Jonathan Pierce never imagined seeing associated with his name, it also accelerated Naomi's already meteoric rise, proving once again that her success was the best response to anyone who had ever underestimated her worth. The headlines that exploded across New York the morning after the 4th of July celebration were exactly what Jonathan Pierce had feared most. CEO abandons wife pregnant with triplets, reunites with her as billionaire, dominated the front page of the New York Post, accompanied by a perfectly timed photograph capturing his expression of shock when Naomi had stepped off the elevator. The Wall Street Journal opted for a more measured approach with Pierce Investments CEO faces scrutiny after family revelations, but the impact was equally devastating. In his corner office on the 52nd floor of the Pierce Investments building, Jonathan stared at the phone that hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. 3 major investors had already canceled meetings. His engagement to Vanessa appeared to be over, judging by the 12 missed calls followed by a terse text. "My publicist will handle the announcement of our separation. Don't contact me." "Sir?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom, hesitant in a way it had never been before. "The board is requesting an emergency meeting at 3 o'clock. Jonathan pressed the button without responding. He turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the city that had always bent to his will, wondering how everything had unraveled so completely in less than 24 hours. On his desk, the morning's newspapers were spread out like evidence at a crime scene. One photo particularly caught his eye: Naomi in her military dress uniform, the 3 girls arranged before her, all 4 illuminated by fireworks against the Manhattan skyline. They looked complete, unbroken, a family that had flourished without him. Across town at the Robinson Defense Systems headquarters, Naomi conducted her morning executive meeting with characteristic efficiency. If the previous night's confrontation had affected her, she showed no signs of it. "The new security protocol has been finalized," she informed her team, advancing to the next slide in her presentation. "Initial testing exceeds all benchmarks." Beth Sullivan, now COO of the company, glanced at her tablet. "Our stock is up 7% since market opening. The exposure from last night has accelerated interest in the company." Naomi nodded, acknowledging the information without dwelling on its cause. "Have the offers from potential partners been cataloged?" "Yes," Sharon replied, sliding a folder across the table. 28 new partnership inquiries since midnight, one particularly insistent one from Pierce Investments. A momentary silence fell across the conference room, the elephant in the room finally acknowledged. "Standard response to all inquiries," Naomi directed. "No preferential treatment, no exclusions." After the meeting, Beth followed Naomi to her office. "Are you all right? Last night must have been unexpected." Naomi placed her tablet on her desk, her movements deliberate. The girls asked about him this morning. They want to know if they'll see him again. And what did you tell them? The truth, that it's their decision, not mine. Naomi straightened a framed photograph of the triplets on her desk. I won't force them to know him, but I won't prevent it either. The week following the confrontation brought a torrent of changes to both their lives. 3 major investment firms suspended their relationships with Pierce Investments, citing concerns about leadership judgment. Jonathan's personal reputation, carefully cultivated through charitable donations and strategic appearances, crumbled as social media dissected his past statements about family values and ethical leadership. Meanwhile, requests for interviews with Naomi poured in, most of which she declined. The Forbes cover story, originally planned as a standard profile of a successful entrepreneur, was hastily rewritten to incorporate the dramatic Independence Day revelation. The publication date was moved up to capitalize on public interest. 1 week after the confrontation, Jonathan finally managed to reach Naomi by phone. "We need to talk about the girls," he said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "I want to know them. I have rights." "Rights?" Naomi's voice was calm, almost clinical. "Legally, you renounced any rights when you signed the documents denying paternity after their birth. Documents your lawyers sent while I was still in the hospital." "I was young, Naomi. I made a terrible mistake." His voice trembled slightly. "Let's resolve this amicably. I can offer child support, premium healthcare plans, education at the best schools." "The girls already have all of that," she interrupted. "My company offers an excellent healthcare plan. Their education funds are fully financed for Harvard, Yale, or any university they choose. And as for money..." She paused deliberately. "How much is Pierce Investments worth these days? 800 million? Robinson Systems is valued at 1.2 billion. My daughters are heirs to a larger empire than yours." The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. "Look," Jonathan finally said, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but at least let me meet them. I'm their father." "No, Jonathan. A father is someone who shows up, who holds hands during high fevers at 3 in the morning, who teaches how to ride bicycles and helps with homework. You're just a genetic donor." After hanging up, Naomi sat motionless at her desk, not exactly triumphant, but certainly free. The conversation had confirmed what she already knew. The power dynamic between them had irreversibly shifted. The woman he had once discarded as insufficient now stood as his superior in every measurable way. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Jonathan made his move. Without warning, he appeared outside Bright Horizons Academy, where the triplets attended school. He waited by the entrance, 3 expensive teddy bears clutched awkwardly in his arms, his luxury car parked nearby, trunk filled with elaborately wrapped gifts. When the dismissal bell rang, he straightened his tie nervously, rehearsing what he would say. The girls emerged among a stream of students, immediately identifiable. 3 identical faces framed by dark curls, backpacks nearly as large as they were. Beth Sullivan walked beside them, now serving as both COO and security director where the girls were concerned. Jonathan stepped forward, clutching the teddy bears like shields. "Hello, girls. I'm your father." The triplets looked at him with the same inquiring expression, a look so reminiscent of Naomi's analytical gaze that Jonathan felt momentarily disoriented. "We know who you are," Amelia said, her tone matter-of-fact. "Mom showed us pictures and explained everything." "Explained what?" Jonathan asked tensely. "That you weren't ready to be a father," Zora replied, "and that it was good, because it meant we had the best mother in the world all to ourselves. And that we don't need you," Maya added calmly, "but that if we wanted to know you someday she would allow it." Jonathan swallowed hard, unprepared for their composure, their articulation, their complete lack of desperate longing for the father they'd never known. "And do you want to know me?" The 3 exchanged glances, communicating silently in the way that only identical siblings can. "Maybe someday," Amelia finally answered. "But right now, we have robotics class and then swimming." They moved past him, leaving Jonathan standing with his arms full of undelivered presents. Beth gave him a look that contained more pity than anger before following the girls to a waiting car. "Wait," Jonathan called after them. "I have gifts for you." Maya turned back briefly. "Why?" The simple question struck him speechless. Why indeed? To buy their affection? To ease his conscience? To repair in one gesture what 7 years of absence had broken? The car door closed before he could formulate a response. The following week brought more professional devastation. Pierce Investments announced a major restructuring after losing a critical government contract, a contract that had been awarded to Robinson Defense Systems. Industry insiders whispered that Jonathan's personal credibility had factored heavily in the decision. His board had been explicit: repair his public image or step down as CEO. The company his grandfather had founded, that his father had expanded, and that he had modernized was now at risk because of his personal choices. 1 month after their Independence Day encounter, Naomi received a thick envelope delivered by private courier. Inside was the original divorce agreement from 7 years earlier, along with a handwritten note. "You were right about everything. I threw away the greatest treasure of my life, not because of finances, but because I will never truly know my daughters. I'll never be part of their first achievements. I chose status over family, and now I have neither. You won in every way that matters." Naomi read the note twice, then placed it in a drawer among other documents from the past. There was no satisfaction in Jonathan's downfall, no vindictive pleasure in watching his carefully constructed world crumble. That would require her to still be emotionally invested in him, and she had moved beyond that years ago. That evening, as she helped the triplets with a science project at the kitchen table, Naomi allowed herself a moment of reflection. Amelia was calculating measurements with precision beyond her years, Zora was documenting their process in flawless sentences, and Maya was assembling the mechanical components with natural expertise. "Mom?" Maya looked up, sensing her mother's distant expression. "Are you sad about seeing that man, our biological father?" Naomi smiled genuinely. "No, sweetheart. I'm exactly where I should be, with exactly who I love." Meanwhile, across the city, Jonathan Pierce stood alone in his empty penthouse holding a magazine photo of the triplets cut from a recent article. He stared at the 3 faces that shared his features but would never share his life, contemplating the empire he had built and what truly mattered, the family he would never truly know, the legacy that wasn't made just of money but of love, values, and presence. It was the most expensive lesson he would ever learn. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.